Staff have already started asking me, why on earth are we doing this in this way, and why can't you get your traditional speaker in and cut a ribbon or cake or what have you, and you know, it's not Kildonan. And for me, I guess, there are I think some critical things that an organisation needs to have within its DNA, especially if we're actually going to move forward for the next 130 years. Kildonan's journey that started in 1881 is really a journey of how people come together to respond to community need, and how then significant individuals like initially Selina Sutherland and Maria Armour, who advocated really strongly to be able to have the opportunity and the legal right to remove children from neglect and place them in homes. In around 1890, after several years of fundraising, a house was finally purchased in North Melbourne, and it was called Kildonan, and that was named after a local parish where Miss Sutherland was born. In 1895, the Scots Church Neglected Children's Aid Society joined with another Presbyterian organisation, and they collectively were called the Scots Church and Presbyterian Neglected Children's Aid Society, and that's probably the front runner of what Kildonan is today.
Since the beginning of community services really in the life of the church, not just the Uniting Church but generally, a lot of the services to the community, providing emergency relief or family support, or adoption of children, placements of children in other families, foster care, they all began often as very small activities in the life of a local congregation that wanted to do something locally.
As a church, we're committed to justice, equity and opportunity for every Australian. So over the decades since European settlement, the Uniting Church has had many agencies right across the country who've worked with individuals, with households and with families.
In 1914, when foster parents became harder to recruit, there was some extension made to the North Melbourne Kildonan home because there were just so many kids that were being admitted, and during this First World War that increased. So by the time we got to 1929, the Scots Church and Neglected Children's Aid Society made a decision to buy land in Elgar Road, Burwood, and there were 18 acres there so that they could build proper facilities and house more children. Caring for those children whose family needs support after the Second World War, Kildonan remained a congregate children's home. So by the middle of 1950s now, we had a situation where Kildonan was under serious financial strain, with the cost of both the state wards and voluntary admissions escalating. It started to become clear that the way we were operating and the methods and services needed modernising. In 1957, Mr Spencer Colliver was employed as a manager of Kildonan's children's home, and he started the modernisation and professionalisation process of Kildonan. A pilot program was established to really test whether the family group home method could be effective with both girls and boys together in the same cottages.
4th of October 1947, when I was taken to the home with my sister, who was 14 months younger than me. We were taken there at one weekend, and our father dropped us off and left us with the matron who was in charge at the time, and we just stood there and watched him walk across the big lawned area in front of the building back to his car, and that was the last time I was to see him for 30 odd years. My mother, I never ever knew. We started off in the kindergarten section. At the age of about 6, I then got transferred to the boys' cottage. In the boys' cottage, there's where I start to learn to make beds, how to use a broom, use a mop, and all those sort of things. There were times when there were too many kids in the home, where it went up to over 100, and to accommodate everybody, we were sleeping head and toe in the beds. There was a school on site. I learnt a lot there. It was just like a normal school. There was no victimisation, there was nothing. And that's probably where it got me in life, because of the education I got there. In a home like that, you learn to defend for yourself, you really do. We never had toys. If somebody gave you a toy, you could always bet your socks that someone else would knock it off and break it, and because they didn't have it, so you couldn't have it, and things like that. So as I say, you learn to defend yourself. There was a matron there. Because she was a matron, she dressed as a matron. She had the white dress, the red cape, and the matron headpiece on as well. And that's how she dressed every day. And she was quite a disciplinarian as well. She used to always sit down the front of the dining room when we had our meals to make sure nothing went on. And staff would wander around as well and keep an eye on you. I can remember all that. We used to go down to the creek at the bottom of the property, go yabbying. We'd bring the yabbies back and put them under the hot water and cook them. That just to supplement our diet. Other times we used to go out looking for snakes, and we found a few. And then right next door to the property where the school was, there was a quince orchard, and we used to go in there and just raid the fruit for the sake of raiding it. Not that you really wanted it, but it was just the sake of raiding it. And the fellow that owned it at times used to come chasing you with an air rifle with saltpetre and chase you off the property. I can remember another fellow that used to come to the home. He was an absolute great bloke. He used to arrange to take girls to the pictures, and the boys, we used to go with him to the Camberwell football ground. He used to take us to the football there to watch the VFA football whenever Camberwell were playing at home. And then other days he would come out to the home, and he used to organise Christmas games and that on the lawn at the front. So another fellow, he was a real gem for the time that he put in, and the money he must have spent just looking after the kids. It was something he liked to do. Now, when I first started work, I started work with the SEC, doing an apprenticeship. That's where I was, down at Yarraville, and I got a job with Celtics. And I started in the mailing department there and worked my way right through to becoming a rep out on the road, and I spent about 12 years working for Celtics. When I was approximately 36, 37 years of age, my father came back into my life, and he then introduced me to other members of my family, but I found it very hard work. A lot of these people, when I was in the home, nobody ever had contact with me over all that period of time. And I think they sort of felt embarrassed about the whole situation. I was excited in the fact that I had made contact with my own relatives. But as time went on, I found that it was myself that was making all the contact. It was all one-way traffic, and it was very hard work to do this. And the moment I stopped, then everything else stopped. So one night I got a phone call from a cousin who I'd never met, and he rang me up to tell me that my father was seriously ill. I visited my father, and he told me that there was nothing they could do. And when he eventually died, I gave him a proper burial. All I've put on the plaque is his year of birth, his year of death, with his name, and I just put down that he was the father of Graham and Judith. So at least he was acknowledged. There was no in loving memory or anything like that, because there's no way I could front up to that. when I read the file from Kildonan and all the correspondence, he never paid a zack to keep us there at all. There's many letters that went backwards and forwards trying to make arrangements for him to come in to meet them and work something out, and it never ever worked. They even wrote him a letter saying to him, would you consider having these children boarded out or adopted? And he answered that very quickly with a one sentence saying no, that we weren't to do that. But as it turned out, Kildonan did arrange for my sister to go out of the home. Now that was against his word of what he wanted. So the home was responsible for actually splitting us up. And my sister left the home with another girl about 2 years older than her that went to the same family, and therefore there was this other boy and myself left without our sisters in the home. Now that's something I can never ever forgive them for, allowing that to happen. I do know today that they would try and keep you together. In those days it was easy just to palm them off and get rid of one headache just like that. Since I have left, I haven't had contact with anybody that I know of. I have been in contact with some other people, but they're outside my time. Put your mind to it, then you got on with life, and that's basically what I did. And I wasn't going to let my upbringing affect my life once I left the home. I'm just on 70 years of age now, and I can't, all I've got is my own 2 kids and grandkids that I can call family, unfortunately.
It was found that the family group home pilot had been so successful that Kildonan then accepted a government offer and the Elgar Road home was sold. In 1961, Mr. Colliver and staff started transferring 70 children to family group homes, and these were homes that were actually purchased in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. One of the new things that happened in parallel to this, it was when we had social workers starting to join staff at Kildonan, and one of the first ones was a very experienced social worker called Mrs. Matthews. And over the years, with Mr. Colliver, she developed the foster care system, which was prioritised by Kildonan as a preferred model of care. It became so successful that 2 more social workers were employed, then started to also incorporate counselling, and getting access to funds to support families financially in order to keep them together. And that's actually something that we still see in today's family services response, which is amazing that in the 60s this is when it was first thought about and trialled.
When the Uniting Church was formed back in the mid-70s, and it was made up of the Congregational Church and the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church, these 3 great movements came together with the great hope of being a larger movement to begin to change the world in which we found ourselves. And those great rhythm, if you like, of change, advocacy, building and transforming communities is still at the heart of the Uniting Church's story.
In the late 70s, we were noticing that children who were brought into care were generally from the inner city suburbs, and the state government funded us to provide a whole range of new family group homes in all the inner Melbourne suburbs as well. And it wasn't until the late 80s that we started to shift the geographical focus in line with the growth of Melbourne's corridors, and we started to look at providing family and youth services for the northern region of Melbourne, and start looking out towards the outer suburbs of Reservoir, Epping, Lalor and Whittlesea. And in doing that, we actually developed a closer relationship with a lot of the Uniting Church parishes that were in that area, and resulted in a number of joint activities with them as well, and a lot of them are continuing to this day.
We're in every community and we develop and deliver every social service you can think of. So from childcare, children's services, family services, disability services, employment support, housing support, aged care, we run some hospitals. The UnitingCare network has 35,000 staff whose work is supported by 24,000 volunteers. That makes us in human terms 3 times the size of Australia's coal industry. We've got around 1,500 delivery sites. That means we have more delivery sites and so more presence across Australian communities than either McDonald's or Australia Post. So we're big, we're here to stay, and we're making a difference in people's lives. UnitingCare Australia, where I work, is the national body for that network, and our role is really a leadership one. We work with our network within the vision and values of the Uniting Church. That's really around social justice and opportunity for all. And we basically advocate to government and to the broader Australian community about the things that matter for Australians who are missing out and left behind.
In 1993, Kildonan actually merged with a child and family service organisation in Whittlesea, and that started our work in a very different type of way. Up until that point, we'd been running predominantly residential services, and it also started us working in a growth corridor.
The families that come to Strengthening Families might have a range of complex issues. We examine with them what their goals are, what they think they need help with. So it may be that we will help refer out to other services that are more specialised. We can advocate for them, and then the other work might also involve direct work with them. So a bit of therapeutic kind of work where we're helping the family to strengthen those relationships in the home.
If I think about the work that I used to do as a child protection practitioner, was about intervening in families' lives, making judgments and assessments about risk to children, engaging and working with families to assist them to develop the skills and capabilities to care for their children more effectively, or to make those difficult decisions about removing children and placing them in care where we felt that the vulnerability was too high. But child protection practitioners can only do part of that work, which is a critical part of that, but they need the support of a whole range of other services that are provided by our funded community service organisations, and Kildonan is one of those organisations. And I think about the times that we would visit families in the Collingwood Flats under really difficult circumstances, and for me it was significant to have a partner from a community service organisation that had a particular skill set, whether it was about strengthening families or enhancing their skills, working side by side with me as the statutory child protection practitioner, trying to engage and work with family and hopefully trying to get better outcomes for the family, but most importantly for the children.
I think Kildonan changes the lives of young people and their families in a range of different ways. So whether that is by doing an awesome art competition and providing young people an opportunity to display and celebrate their art and their skills, I think what comes with that is a stronger sense of self, some validation of their strengths, of their expertise that can otherwise be missed, particularly in contexts of education settings if young people aren't doing art or pursuing those sorts of avenues. By young people having a positive experience of themselves, by having some informed choices, that opens up a range of doors of things that they can choose to do or not choose to do. We all have the right to make choices.
It is important to make sure that everybody has the best shot, and that people are given a chance to fulfil their potential, given a chance to get over some of those speed humps in the way of their life. And I think Kildonan does that brilliantly. I like the integrated service model they have, whereas they might go out to help out with financial counselling because people can't pay the bills, and then out of that there's issues that arise out of perhaps family violence, or there's issues with the kids going off the rails. And Kildonan is able to look after that family in a very broad way.
In 2001, the Board of Governance made a huge decision to cease delivering residential services. That was a major decision. Up until that point, Kildonan had spent all of its history running residential services, and the thinking behind that decision was around wanting to take more of a proactive and preventative service response to families, children and young people. This is the land of the first people, the Indigenous people of Australia, and to acknowledge and respect their rich history. In 2004, the Uniting Church Synod of Victoria and Tasmania produced the Forgotten Australians Resolution, and that was on behalf of the church and the agencies connected to the church. And that was a resolution that was a formal apology on behalf of the church and the agencies. And that included Kildonan as a historical provider of child services.
A wonderful Aboriginal elder from Echuca, Arnie Melva Johnson, once took me aside and said, you know, David, you can have everything, but if you don't have culture, you've got nothing. So you apply that, that's people, that's wherever we come from. So in my work, from my education background, my thinking, meeting Kildonan, it just adds to, in a world where resources are less, more thought has to go into your decision. If you can strategically align with organisations with the skill sets, and then ultimately it's the people who work for those organisations, there's philosophy, but if you get the people right, and Kildonan have the people, so the ultimate is that you have a relationship, like all my previously, as I said, privileged life experiences, that you hope like hell I can transfer some learnings to them, but then also the learnings will be transferred to us.
In 2000 era, we had another new initiative that came about with corporate organisations and working proactively with them to address hardship and prevent families from coming to financial counsellors.
That they'd taken a program that was there to help people who were down and out and help them better manage their financial affairs, to one of making the leap to say to the corporate world, do you realise what you're doing to these people? Do you realise that there is a better way? Do you realise that these people do want to pay their bills? They don't necessarily don't want to pay you, they can't pay you. And the corporate world embraced the opportunity to understand better the plight of people in financial hardship, to develop financial hardship policies, instead of cutting off their water or gas or electricity, working with them to be paid.
And a lot of that work has included organisations like ANZ, AGL, Origin Energy, Yarra Valley Water, Credit Corps, and more recently Western Water as well.
In the end of the day, we're both about customer service. I mean, obviously we're very different organisations, but the major outcome for me is that we're dealing with a segment of customers who are low income and vulnerable. They're not in a position necessarily to be able to work their way through without some support. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done to help them through that. And Kildonan has provided us the skills and the techniques and the infrastructure and the training and the communication to be able to do that. So in the end of the day, it's okay to say we've won an award, a Prime Minister's Award, which is fantastic from a media perspective, but what we get every day is feedback from customers on the way we deal with them. You know, you're different. I can't believe you're listening to me. When I tell you something, you believe me. No one else does. I ring other utilities and they don't believe me that I can't afford to pay. You listen. To us, that's like gold. That means that the program is working. We're collecting money that arguably we wouldn't have collected before.
So part of servicing our consumer market is a strategy around working with who we call our hardship customers. So they're typically customers who are in financial distress and historically have found it difficult to pay their bills, and hence the whole program that was initially developed by us around how do we start to support these customers. And so Kildonan came into the frame because Kildonan started to help us identify who these customers were because we felt our process wasn't very effective. It was almost like we caught these consumers too late in the process, and so we have a referral scheme that Kildonan helps us with that actively says here's a customer and hence a client of Kildonan's who is in trouble, and how do we actually both help solve together. So there's about 8,000 to 10,000 such customers we try to help and support every year, and Kildonan is a huge part of that program. So we've had a relationship of now over 8 years, and our company is only just on 11 years old, so it's a long relationship. You know, when the feedback says, this was fantastic, I'm so glad I live in Victoria because I don't believe I can necessarily get this anywhere else. And they single out the auditor, the energy auditor from Kildonan, and the agent from my call centre. Every one of those is inspirational because then I know we've got it right.
I met Stella 12 months ago at Minister Madden, had a round table with the social respect agenda which Stella co-hosted, and the idea was to explain to corporates of how Kildonan works in that field. They worked with the likes of Yarra Valley Water and ANZ Bank and a number of others, but there were 4 development companies represented there, and the idea was, from a social point of view in the state of Victoria, how can these companies, from my perspective, the development company, work with organisations like Kildonan to address huge social problems that are impacting.
More recently, in 2006, Kildonan merged with another UnitingCare organisation called Preston Creative Living, who had been delivering a range of services in Reservoir. And we took on new services which included the Men's Behaviour Change Program and a Women's Support Service, and they too have in the last year tripled in size and have led to another office this year being located in Heidelberg to address the issue of family violence, which has been escalating in recent years.
So the Men's Behaviour Change Program works obviously with men that use violence in their relationships. The men can have one-on-one counselling, and when they're ready and they've acknowledged their own violent behaviour, they are invited and they can be part of a 12-week group. The men might talk about what their childhood was like, or understanding their own patterns of violence and the triggers, and understanding the cycle of violence. And they also talk about the impact on families and the impact on the children's development of their violence. It's really quite a moving program actually, and you can go and observe. Brett encourages observers, and sitting in that group and watching some of the stuff that happens with those men is really amazing, and especially if you see the group at the start of the 12 weeks and then go and see them more towards the end of the 12 weeks. I find it really, it's really dynamic, really special, that program.
One of the most significant events to have affected us in the last couple of years has probably been our response to the Black Saturday bushfire. Kildonan was one of the largest providers of case management services on behalf of the Department of Human Services, and we also provided youth support, financial counselling, grief and loss counselling to all of the affected areas. And it's an area of work that we are still delivering and walking with the community.
Sue Fraser and I were lucky in Kinglake initially because Sue identified that the CFA workers themselves up here were doing everything for everybody else and not themselves, and I was lucky enough to do a couple of small things for the CFA workers to get them back on track, but then word of mouth got out that there was someone in the town that could actually help support them through some of the things, and we've been able to generate a lot of interest in the Bushfire Financial Counselling Program here. And the biggest thing that I find from people that come in to see me is that they say initially Kildonan acted and responded in an appropriate way, and we're still doing that.
The last 12 months has seen an enormous amount of change, both structurally and in terms of new programs at a number of different levels. One is a new pilot called the Family Coaching program, and that's an integrated placement, prevention and reunification service.
And that's a new innovative approach to trying to provide a much more intensive level of support to those families that are whose children are at risk of coming into the care environment. So what we're trying to do is avert the need from having to remove children and place them into the care by providing a much more robust, a much more integrated and intensive service.
Another has been the work that we've started in partnering with property developers in growth corridors that has come as a result of seeing the escalation of bankruptcies and homes being repossessed in the growth corridors.
States like Victoria and around Australia, it's about setting up affordable living. It's not just about an affordable product, house being house and land. It's about once I get there, I need to afford my petrol bill, my energy bill. We've decided to trial for a 3-year period at a new land lease project called Atherstone in Mountain South, the opportunity of bringing Kildonan in the front end, so our salespeople, our engagement to the market through our massive marketing budget will be understanding about the house, understanding about the utilities used by the house, informing the decision of the client to purchase, and being skilled enough to make the right decision.
And I don't think you can talk about how an organisation like Kildonan grows and becomes innovative over the years without actually, identifying and acknowledging that it is the people within the organisation that have made that happen. What is truly inspirational about Kildonan is this is the place where people within it, and there's a culture within Kildonan that says, well, if something's not working, if there's a need that's not being met, how can we creatively and strategically and structurally actually address that need? What do we need to do? And let's make it happen.
It might sound simple, but when you're talking about families and what it means for them, whether or not their children are home with them or not, that's really important stuff. So there's a lot of those little gems and simple stories, I guess, but for families and children really means something. Yeah.
In several states now, we have or are about to have the Kildonan model operating in other UnitingCare organisations. That's incredibly important because it's the only model I know that actually addresses the causes of fuel poverty and addresses the causes of people coming into our emergency relief and financial counselling services and actually lifts people out of poverty permanently. That's an extraordinary gift to give to Australian communities.
For me, that's one of the key ingredients of an organisation that's functioning well and providing quality services, that not only are they focused on their internal delivery approach, but also the strong partnerships that they are developing with other community service organisations.
I would love to think that in 3 years, 5 years and 10 years' time, the Kildonan model was the industry standard, the public policy benchmark for household energy efficiency, and I'd like to think that the Kildonan team will continue to be creative and innovative to build on what they're doing on the ground in communities so that it can be scaled up and rolled out right across the country.
What can we do to prepare for those who are going to come after us? How can we reconfigure and challenge ourselves? How can we challenge industry, government, the community sector to make sure we're not just doing things that have done before, but we're actually building on that and we're looking at new solutions for different types of problems, more complex issues that are facing us. Passion, integrity,
resilience,
professionalism,
making a positive difference in people's lives,
never being too scared to ask a question,
dignity for everybody,
working with others,
relationships,
and knowing what you don't know,
having the courage to give back,
leadership,
Innovation.
Integration.
Access to the means and opportunity to live a decent life.
Strategy.
Making a difference.
Starting with the end in mind.
Community focus.
Being on the same page.
Justice, hope, opportunity for all.